We've talked a little bit about what neoliberalism is and some problems with it. Now I'm going to go ahead and critique some of my critiques of neoliberalism. I've given you a bit of a one-sided view today. There are some compelling arguments in support of neoliberalism, and we'll quickly review those. So the first critique of the neoliberal critiques is that neoliberalism and this conception of neoliberalism is that is itself, it's just a poorly defined economic boogeyman where basically you can point to anything you don't like in our current society, economy, politics, and say, oh, that's neoliberalism. So for example, during this lecture, I told you that like, oh, hey, you don't like your job? That's neoliberalism. The environment being destroyed? That's neoliberalism. You don't like Republicans? That's because they're neoliberals. You don't like Democrats? They're neoliberals too. And some people, I think rightly, feel that neoliberalism is just this boogeyman. When there's anything we don't like in our society, we can point to it and say neoliberalism. People who support our current market-driven economy also point out that the rise of market-driven economies has coincided with substantial increases in the length and quality of life. So one graph, we see how the life expectancy has just grown exponentially since the 1820s. Meanwhile, infant mortality rate has dropped exponentially across that same time period. And these things are happening at the same time that market economies are growing across the world. I think that is a valid argument. I would challenge it just by saying that a lot of things happened in the last 200 years outside of the market that contributed to extended lifespans and improved quality of life. So for example, when we think of government provided services like sanitation, clean water, electricity, zoning laws, environmental protection laws that keep poison out of our water, those things are not a result of the market-driven economy. Those things have directly impacted the length and quality of life. And so, yes, the quality of life and the length of life has increased during neoliberalism, but we don't know if that's because of open markets or if that's because of something else. Correlation is not causation. The rise of market-driven economies has coincided with substantial increases in productivity and wealth. So we can see on the graph on the left shows that basically everyone is much wealthier than they were in 1820. And we can see on the graph of the right, that is GDP per capita, which is essentially an estimate of how productive each person in a society is. And the productivity of individuals has grown exponentially along with the rise of market-driven economies. Another thing is that neoliberalism is liberal. And again, I don't mean that in a partisan way. I'm not talking about Democrats here. I mean liberal in kind of like Western liberal ideas of equality and diversity and open-mindedness. Neoliberalism doesn't care where ideas come from. It cares about how valuable, how effective they are. Neoliberalism is really against any sort of bias or discrimination. In a neoliberal system, you shouldn't be judged by the color of your skin or your gender, that you should be judged by the value of your labor. And so in this unique way, neoliberalism really does embrace what many people would agree are good ideas for our society: broad-mindedness, equality, and diversity. All right, so today we went over neoliberalism very quickly. We talked about how neoliberalism refers to a return to laissez-faire economics, that it's defined by blind faith in the power of markets, that it is an all-encompassing cultural paradigm, that it prioritizes growth above good, and that neoliberal critiques are themselves critiqued for being overly broad and ignoring some of the accomplishments of the last 200 years. Thank you for listening.